Hi, this is Rachel, founder and presenter of the Multidimensional Show. In this interview, we talk with Herman Mittelholzer, modern alchemist, researcher and owner of Chilectric Products, the UK's premier producer of a product called Ormus. Why are we starving in a world of plenty? Why is there so much disease in the Western world where our technology claims to have the solution for every problem? Has the solution been around for thousands of years but been hidden from us? Is there something vital missing from our diets that we need to thrive, and why is it missing? Is there actually a simple remedy that we could make at home for pennies? Hi Herman.
Hello Rachel. Hi David.
Hi there.
Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
Cool.
So I'm Rachel.
And I'm David.
For those that are watching and haven't seen us before, we run the Multidimensional Show, which is a platform for disseminating information, knowledge on realms beyond our own and beyond the five senses. And we invite you all to explore beyond the veil with our talks and interviews and conferences, which run every year.
We do. Tonight we're talking to Herman Mittelholzer about Ormus, I believe. Am I saying that right?
That's correct, yes. Pronounced it correctly.
Cool. So I will hand over to you to say hello and tell us a bit about what you do and who you are.
Hi, well, my name's Herman, and for about the last 10 years I've been experimenting and researching with a product or substance called Ormus. Strangely enough, it's something that hasn't been in the public view for a very long time, although it has been around and been known about for several thousands of years. So it's one of those little substances which has been around all the time and been kept as secret information. So over the last few years, I've kind of taken the policy that I will develop it, I'll research it, I'll find out as much as I can about what it is, what it does, and also to ensure that I broadcast the information to as many people as possible, so little secrets that have been held back from us won't be held back any longer. The more people who know about it, as far as I'm concerned, the more people who make it and take it themselves, the better. And really, the way to kick off with an explanation of what it is perhaps by looking at what we haven't got in our society at the moment. We have, in my opinion, what you can only really term as malnutrition. And malnutrition in the Western world, it's quite an extraordinary thing. It's led to a complete upset of the endocrine system, obesity, the huge numbers of problems that we're seeing on a physical level and on a mental level as well. But we have other things in there that are also interfering with our physical and mental development. But malnutrition is one of the things that people don't really see, because they say, well, we've got lots of food. But malnutrition isn't just a state of not having food. It's actually a state where you don't have the right nutritional elements in your diet in order to promote the best health. When you're in that situation, the automatic response, if you like, of the body's autonomic system would be to say, well, I need these substances and therefore I'm going to eat more. I'm going to get as much food into me as possible to try and to reach the optimum level of these nutritional substances that I need. Most of them are actually trace elements. So what do we see as a result of that? We see a massive increase in obesity. People are trying to top up by quantity as opposed to quality. And one of the things that has really been missing in our diet, really from about the 1950s onwards, and the expansion of petrochemical food basis, which is basically petrochemical nutrients which are actually sprayed on crops. Those crops will grow nice and big. It'll look good on quantity wise. But one of the things that is missing from the food that we should be eating today are monoatomic elements. Monoatomic elements are elements that we need in order to grow. They are naturally produced in children right up until the age that they become adults. So generally speaking, at the age of 18, monotonic elements are ceased to be produced by the body. At that particular stage, normal, healthy human beings with a healthy diet would get the supplement of monoatomic elements that they need from their food. But because we've actually substituted food quality for quantity, because obviously quantity makes more money, we now have a situation where even in the best of organic food, we have a lack of these monoatomic elements, which our body needs. Now, if I can just go a little bit sideways now, there's a kind of a trinity in everything. The trinity really runs as a 3 parts, but it's really 4 parts when you take it to the next stage. So I suppose in the 3-dimensional world, you look at this being a trinity. So if you look at the sun has a very, very hot inner core. It has a crustaceous layer, which is only about 20,000 degrees. And outside of that, it has a corona.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you take that to the next stage, you come to the Earth, and the Earth has a very hot inner core, molten inner core. It has a crust, it has an atmosphere. And you look at the human body, and the human body has a very, very dense cellular inner core, it has a skin, and then we have on top of that 5 senses, which we use for sensing and interacting with the world. And in all 3 cases as well, there's an additional element which is largely and almost completely ignored, especially in the Western world, and that is every single element has a Meissner field, a magnetic field. In the case of the sun, it's a huge magnetic field. In the case of the Earth, it's also a magnetic field, which protects the Earth from solar radiation. And in the case of human beings, it's a Meissner field, which is often called the light body, or it's called the car, or basically speaking, the aura. Now, what has really been the big mistake, and is really good that major scientists, leading scientists, are actually starting to sort this out. But the DNA which we have, which is supposed to determine everything that we are, isn't what we've been told it has been. It's essentially not the controller of our bodily functions, our body life, and our development. It is just what we are born with. What actually triggers the DNA is not the DNA itself. The DNA itself is very, very passive. It just sits there, and it's a blueprint for the body to be able to replicate cells, etc. But what actually causes the correct or incorrect replication of those cells is the health of the body. And the health of the body is organized by signals that come in the form of different formats. So the signal may come in the format of chemical, something you swallow, food that you eat. It may come in the format of ultraviolet light, for instance, that will trigger melatonin in your skin and start to trigger a method that will give you a tan. So we have literally hundreds of thousands of signals coming in. Those signals have to be filtered by the body. And the stronger the body is, the better your health will be, because it will be able to filter out the bad ones and absorb the good ones. Now, when you consider, and this isn't considered by Western medicine at all, when you consider that the very first stage of contact we have with the outside world is not our skin, it's not our 5 senses at all, it is the Meissner field, which basically is the first point of contact. And one of the main sources of pollution or basically pollution of any sort is on a frequency level, is radio pollution. So if you tag back again and you look at the amount of radio pollution that has been increasing over the decades, you can also see a correlation between that and the level of illness, especially in the Western world. You're looking at a massive increase in cancer, when it used to be about 1 in 200 and it became 1 in 40. Now it's something in the region of 1 in 2 people are expected to suffer cancer at some stage in their life. And by 2035, I believe they expect everyone to be suffering from cancer at one stage or another.
Wow.
Now, you have to ask yourself why that situation is. And the situation is because the pollution that we're getting is signal pollution that comes in the form of radio waves, Wi-Fi, etc., etc. So when you're looking, for instance, at the 5G debacle that we're going through at the moment, 5G is a very, very sophisticated and also very aggressive signaling device that will affect your cells. So if, for instance, you are in a radioactive environment, and what, if you take it back a step, what the body's DNA and the endocrine system is doing is trying to optimize your physical survival in this particular world. So your Meissner field and your senses are sensing the external environment in which you're living, and then trying to optimize your body to be able to thrive within that world. But if the signals that are coming in are wrong, then the DNA will trigger the production of the wrong kind of proteins. Those proteins will build the wrong kind of cells, and those cells will then be able to grow in a patch-rogue fashion. So as we see the amount of pollution, and it's air pollution, it's mainly food pollution, but there's a huge amount of radio pollution, we are seeing those problems exacerbated and rapidly increasing. And one of the reasons that is that with the lack of monoatomic elements in our diets, our Meissner field, which, as I said, is the first point where we make contact with, if you like, the electromagnetic frequency spectrum, which has a huge effect on us. The monoatomic elements that aren't in our body is not building a strong Meissner field. In other words, we're not then able to filter out or to cope with the signaling that's coming in. Therefore, the body and the DNA is being, which is an aerial, multi-frequency aerial, is triggering the wrong kind of cell production. So we see this, and this is specifically a major problem in the Western world, where we have so much artificial stuff. So if we are to be able to boost our immune system, which is our endocrine system, or operated by endocrine system, we first of all need to have our Meissner field boosted. If you look at it in terms of Kirlian photography, and you look at an aura or field around a person, you can often see dark spots, you can see holes in there. And those holes correlate to weak areas of the field, which is the first point of protection, through which radio frequency can also get in. So when you have a strong Meissner field, you are very, very likely to be extremely healthy. When you have a weak Meissner field, you are likely to get ill quite a lot. And it's one of those things that will cascade. And what we see with the endocrine system imbalance, because things like obesity are perfect examples of an unbalanced endocrine system. The endocrine system basically is the hormonal system of the body, which is responsible for interacting and creating the proteins that build your cells. But you also train that, so that, for instance, if you are trained, your endocrine system is trained from a young age to have to cope with, for instance, very, very high starch foods. If your diet from a young age has been high starch foods or foods with too little nutrition, what your body will do, or your endocrine system will instruct your body to do, is to store that, because it thinks you're in a starvation mode. So your body will be, or your endocrine system will be telling your body to store that, and the way that it will store that will be to store it in fat. The other thing is that if you have a lot of pollutants in your environment, your body will also store those pollutants in fat cells in order to protect the rest of your body from absorbing it. So we have a double whammy that's going on here, and the first stage where it's broken down is that the body's Meissner or electric field is not sufficiently strong to be able to cope with the signals that are coming in. Now, as I was saying, the signals do come in different forms. The signals come in the form of chemical, which the allopathic drugs or big pharma have exploited. They come in the form of food, for instance. So if you swallow something which the body finds is poisonous, it will damage you. But it's not actually, and this is where it all tends to separate out from East and West, it's not all on the basis of chemicals or material science. In the Western world, we're told that everything is material science, everything is a particle, everything will react in a particular way. But it's not. The particle will create what is known as a quantum wave. It's energy. It's like dropping a pebble into a pond. You will get ripples. And those ripples then go through the body, and then they instruct the DNA and the endocrine system how it should be operating it. Those ripples tell the body where it is and the environment to which it has to adapt. Now, I've thought about this for a long time, and it's also very, very handy that the world's top geneticist is now also saying exactly the same thing. In fact, he was saying it a long time before I was thinking it. It's just that we weren't going to hear it, and that's Dr. Bruce Lipton. So I would suggest to anyone that if they wanted a starting point of where to get healthy, they should, in fact, watch as many of Bruce Lipton's YouTube videos, and there are several of them, as possible, because it will give you a really good direction in the right direction in order for you to be able to start sorting yourself out. Now, one of the things that Bruce Lipton actually will tell you is that one of the most important factors in keeping a healthy body, a healthy mind, is your belief system, your consciousness. Your consciousness actually is the brain that operates the whole thing. So if you, for instance, are feeling down and depressed and feeling pretty under the weather, the chances are you are going to get ill. Because you are not in a position that's going to allow your body to be able to thrive. You've basically got two conditions. You have a condition where your body goes, it's basically fight or flight. And when that happens, all of your renal systems and blood systems will basically shut down to your defense systems. Well, basically speaking, it will shut down to all of the systems that you need in order to keep you alive on a short-term basis. So what happens under those circumstances is, I think Bruce Lipton actually says it very, very succinctly, is you are in two positions. One of them, either you're going to be thriving, or all of a sudden you're met with a lion that wants to eat you. What are you going to do? Are you going to be thinking about your long-term health under those situations, or just getting the hell out of there? In which case, all the blood will go to your externals, your arms, your legs, so you can either fight or flight. It's not going to go to any system that's going to support your health, for obvious reasons, because as you're saying, the lion doesn't care whether you're healthy or not, if it's going to eat you. So the best thing really is just to get the hell out of there. But our lifestyles place us very much in a permanent situation of stress. So that when we are looking at having a situation where we need to have our bodies looking after itself, to repair the cells, to rebuild proper cells, because we're under stress, we're always in a stress mode, which means that we're not going to be in a situation where our bodies are going to be in self-repair mode. So under those circumstances, it's not just the physical environment in which we live that's important, it's also the psychological and mental environment in which we live, which basically will trigger a lot of the ailments that we have. But if you look at the whole thing as a whole, rather than looking at, as doctors in allopathic medicine tends to, you look at things as individual symptoms. And if you can cure that symptom, that's gone away. Oh, you're feeling a bit depressed, well, we'll give you an upper. Oh, you're feeling a little bit too hyper, we'll give you a downer. And one of the main things, of course, is the distribution of things like Prozac. And Prozac, basically speaking, is fluoride. And what fluoride does is it goes to the brain, it suppresses the pineal gland, basically starts to interfere with the pineal cycle, and essentially it cuts you off from everything. You don't care about anything because it's almost you're detached. So you don't feel depressed, you don't feel happy, you don't really feel anything. And that's just curing one of the symptoms, but doing a hell of a lot of harm. But every single time you take something which is of an allopathic nature, there always is a follow-on, another ripple goes out. And the ripples can be described in two forms. You're looking at two forms of quantum reaction, which is, again, it's all frequency-based. So if you are in a nurturing environment, you are in a situation where the signals that are coming in are going to increase your energy. When you're in a situation where you are in a very negative situation, you're going to be finding that the energy that you're going to be getting is going to deplete your energy. These two things, which are often described as good vibes or bad vibes, in quantum terms are referred to as either constructive interference or destructive interference. So if you can imagine two waves interacting that are in harmony with each other, what they will do is they will increase their size. They will add to each other. When you have, and that's constructive interference. If you have two waves which are not in harmony with each other, what you'll have is that they will deplete the energy of each other, which is called destructive interference. So what we have in life is trying to establish a balance between constructive interference, which is being in a situation where you are being nurtured and fed with energy, or destructive interference, where basically you're in a situation where your energy is being permanently sapped. And unfortunately, the way that society in the West is formulated, we live in an area really where there is a huge amount of destructive interference. Now, when you look at it from one of the things I was doing when I was looking at sorting out what Ormus is, I was experimenting. I have this thing where I always want to know how things work. The funny thing was, my son was about 7 years old, and I walked into the front room and he'd taken one of his toy cars to pieces. And I thought, oh, I know what that's about. He was exactly the same as me. I had to know how it worked, what was inside. And he'd just taken this thing to pieces. He never managed to put it back together again, but he still had to know, and he's still very much that way. But when you are looking at an overall system, you have to bear in mind that it covers a wide range of different factors. And those factors all work together. And they are, in fact, in many ways, fractal. If I get down here, it's a toy. This is a toy, which is a wonderful little thing, which basically is a demonstration of how everything really works. So you have here what you would term as a Meissner field. It pops up as a toroid. Everything is toroidal, whether it be a sun, whether it be a galaxy, whether it be a solar system, whether it be a planet, whether it be right the way down to an electron. They are all toroidal, and they all work like little tornadoes. That is where the energy comes from. And what you are trying to do with Ormus is to boost the energy which your body has available to be able to strengthen the Meissner field, and in order to be able to allow your body the filters it needs to grow in a positive way rather than a negative way. So what I've kind of worked out is that Ormus is actually, or the creation of Ormus is in fact the capture of raw chi energy.
Okay.
You don't need a lot of it, but the way it works is that it's the way I'm making Ormus anyway, is using Dead Sea salt. So you're creating a saline solution, and from that saline solution, obviously you have sodium and chloride and all of the little elements that go along with it. Mainly of them, most of them are actually trace elements within the salt. You have to use the raw salts. You can't use processed salts because it doesn't work at all. Within that, you have, obviously, that's dissolved in water. And the water itself then produces what you would term as a form of seawater. Into that, you place an alkalizing agent. I use sodium hydroxide. The sodium hydroxide basically interacts with the salts, because the salts themselves, being sodiums, are metals, so they're conductors. Chi energy, which is passing through everything, is then momentarily slowed down. I don't know whether if you look at it, a light passing through a plastic cube or glass, it bends and you get refraction and things like that. So when the chi energy, which is in everything anyway, because it's what powers atoms, when it is interfered with, it aims to protect itself. So in order to do that, it goes into a chemical reaction or an electrochemical reaction, which then surrounds it. Because, take the next step, chi energy is not a particle, it's a wave, it's a vibrational state. It doesn't want to be trapped. And so what it does, it uses the chemical constituents around it, which is how galaxies and everything else form, but the chemical constituents around it are then used by the chi energy, or powered by the chi energy, into providing what would be a force field around it. This is held in the form of a silicon dioxide crystal. And silicon dioxide crystal allows the chi energy to bounce up and down as in total internal reflection all day and all night without any problems at all, because it's actually balanced itself. Everything in nature tries to balance itself. So when you create an imbalance, in other words, you're plowing too much energy through a particular space, it tries to balance itself. And in this case, in the chemical reaction, the chi energy is trapped in silicon dioxide crystals. So we then, this stuff is, from my own point of view, is then it's then chemically washed and what have you, so it's pure, and then bottled. So when you take a dose of Ormus, what you are doing is you are not actually taking something which is going to automatically improve your health on a physical level. What it does is you swallow it, it hits the hydrochloric acid in your stomach, it dissolves, the silicon dioxide crystals automatically dissolve, they go back to being water. The chi energy is then released into your Meissner field. So it's actually strengthening the field, which is allowing you the first barrier of protection. And that shield is what is actually lacking in, or the strength of that field is what is actually lacking in most people these days, especially in the Western world, where we have two things. We have poor diet and we have high pollution. And poor diet and high pollution are basically drivers for the obesity and the health crises that we have. And of course, you can look at perhaps trying to take a short-term measure on it, which would be an allopathic medicine, take a pill for it, which is what the big pharma would like us to do. But the keenest point that you can do if you want to be healthy is to ensure that your Meissner field is also stronger. Now, people who eat organic food are likely to be healthier than those who eat unorganic food. And that is because organic food contains more ormus or more ormus elements than the non-organic food. But even having said that, the amount of ormus which is even in organic food these days is so much less than it should be. So the kind of food that you can probably get the most health from is if you made your own organic food and you grew it in your own garden at home, and you allowed your garden to replenish itself each year. And that means letting the sun hit the soil and what have you, maybe doing one patch one year, allowing it to be fallow the next, and then moving on to the next, but avoiding chemical food stocks at all to get as much natural as you can. Alternatively, what you can do is if you make your own ormus, you can take the wash water, which is when you're part of the purification process, and you can feed that to your plants. There's a guy in America who did that and ended up with walnuts the size of tennis balls. I've done it with tomatoes, with cherry tomatoes, and the cherry tomatoes would double the size. I've got something on my webpage where you can see the difference between two sets of organic tomatoes that were grown in absolutely identical conditions. Only one of them was almost fed and the other one wasn't. So you can see that it has a really powerful effect. And what you're doing when you're feeding a plant with Ormus is you're allowing that plant to maximize its potential in its environment, because you're strengthening it. And when you don't, then essentially that plant will also act in the same way that we do. I think there's been an experiment that's been carried out several times by which plants have been fed with water, mineral water, distilled water, and water that's been irradiated with microwaves. And essentially the distilled water plants were okay, the mineral water plants were very healthy, and the microwave plants died. And it's to do with structuring. So the structure of everything is a function of the frequencies which that substance enjoys at any time. Again, either feeding it with constructive interference or destructive interference. So when you're looking at cymatics, for instance, and you're actually vibrating a liquid at a positive frequency, one that likes like 413, then essentially you are putting energy into that structure. And when you freeze it, you will see that you will get really good positive shapes from it. Whereas destructive vibrations will essentially give you a completely mangled looking frozen shape. So these things all tie together, and if you look at it from the point of view of just looking at each particular element, it doesn't seem to make any sense. But when you start to put all of the elements together and you base it, the whole structure of everything is based on what should be a harmonious chord or harmonious frequency, then you can better understand where Ormus fits in to the mechanism. But perhaps at this stage it would be good to just take a step back for a few thousand years, and we look at the ancient Egyptians, because he used to make this stuff in vast quantities. Okay. They used to put it in all sorts of things. He used to put it in cakes, which were little conical. They're actually displayed as little conical cakes. They used to eat this stuff, and they used to say it was food for the light body. Now you have all these pyramids, and if we're talking in terms of pyramids, we're talking in terms of orgone technology, which is Wilhelm Reich, which he almost, and I think that the big pharma who basically killed him knew that he was onto it. And what Wilhelm Reich had stumbled on more than anything else was the fact that frequency operates everything. And you take, say, a Reich chamber, which is basically a capacitor, So you have a layer of metal, you have a layer of natural substance, like wool or cotton or something like that, and you run this through, so you have 7 layers and you have metal on the inside. And what it does is the energy, the orgone energy, as he called it, basically is amplified because it's trapped and reflected backwards and forwards, and then it comes out in the center of the orgone chamber. But what that orgone chamber is doing, is it's amplifying the natural frequencies of the planet. And so when you sit in an orgone chamber and you are basically absorbing the natural energies of your environment, which is the planet that we were all born on, what happens is it reminds the DNA of how it should be. So everything starts to self-correct. It's a very, very simple thing. But if you then, as I was saying, go back a few thousand years and think in terms of what are pyramids? Well, pyramids, when you look at them, are the business end of a crystal. Crystals are how the planets store orgone energy, or chi energy, or Ormus energy. So what you actually have with the planet is it's feeding itself with the energy that it needs to thrive. And then you have the Egyptian society, or whatever society built the pyramids or had that knowledge. They are filling crystal-shaped objects all around the planet with substances that look very much like Ormus, made from gold. And what that does, it would put an orgone shield around the whole planet. Under those circumstances, it would promote health, because every single person, every single being on the planet, whether it be animal or plant or whatever, would be bathed in the natural life-giving and nurturing energies of the planet. So I get the impression that actually the series of pyramids that we have around the world are in fact broadcast stations and repeater stations that allow orgone energy basically to permeate the whole planet. Because if you think in terms of what is purported to be the case, that we were infiltrated by extraterrestrials who are using us as slaves and genetically modified us, what would they want? They would want us as healthy as possible, as productive as possible. And so the whole basis of the pyramid structures, I think, are to do with being able to broadcast natural and nurturing earth energies. That's something we've forgotten. The Russians have done some experiments with it, with pyramids, and they have managed to increase crop yields by 30% with seeds that have been grown that have been actually orgone exposed before. So you irradiate them with orgone, you tell them what their healthiest constituents of DNA are, you plant them out and they flourish because they're healthy. And this is what we don't have here, because the food that we have is basically sprayed with oil or chemical constituents derived from oil, which will fill the plant on a chemical level into becoming swollen and large and looks productive, but nutrition-wise, there's virtually nothing there. It's like eating a sponge, to be perfectly honest. I don't know if you've ever eaten one of the big, juicy-looking grapefruits from Florida, but they are tasteless. They are huge, but they are completely tasteless. And the only time that they get their flavors is when they go into bottling, where they add citric acid and sugars and all sorts of things like that, which fool you into thinking that it's the real stuff. But the plants themselves are not healthy, although they are growing large fruit, because it's being done chemically. So that's giving you something to think about. Is there anything that you...
Made me think about the negative ions that we get from the sea or from Himalayan salt lamps. You're talking about Himalayan salt or Dead Sea salt.
Yes.
Is there a link there with Ormus?
Yeah, there is. Your endocrine system, basically, every single part of it, the endocrine system is a hormonal system in the body which is responsible for interacting with your DNA and producing proteins and building cells. Now, every single part of the endocrine system resonates with a particular metal, and it does so on a monoatomic level. So if, for instance, you are taking Ormus gold, for instance, as a prime example, Ormus gold is made using Dead Sea salt, and the assayed ormic content, as I tend to call it, is 70% gold and 30% magnesium. These are all trace elements, but they're very, very powerful. Now, the magnesium resonates with the kidneys and liver, part of the endocrine system, and apparently we are basically magnesium short anyway, as far as our diets go. But the gold orm resonates specifically with the pineal gland in the brain.
Okay.
And that's very important because the brain is the management suite that basically operates your whole body. That's where your operating system lives. And so to have good messaging between your brain and body is very, very important. But most importantly is that the gold orm resonating with the pineal gland does other things as well. The pineal gland, if you've ever seen any of the diagrams or the new diagrams of the brain, where you have all your dendrites and neurons on the outside and in cortical matter, everything converges on one point. Mm-hmm. Everything converges around the pineal gland. It has a very, very important role. And then you have your spinal column and the nerves that come up your spinal column to meet the brain, and they also converge on the pineal gland. So it's not just there for moderating your sleeping and waking cycles. There's medical practitioners would like us to know it's a highly important function of coordinating the brain and the body. If you've ever read The Spirit Molecule by Rick Strassman, you will know that it's also a producer of dimethyltryptamine, DMT, which itself allows you to step outside of yourself. If you take an ayahuasca journey, you are basically propelled out of your body into a realm where we actually live, but aren't allowed to communicate with through our own bodies. So it's very interesting that the pineal gland is the one which is targeted specifically by fluoride in water and what have you, because there seems to be a concerted effort to detach us from our real potential. And maybe that is the mentality which has been handed down by our former slave masters thousands and thousands of years ago, who basically bred us apparently as slave culture. And maybe that's a little trip that has been kept within the mechanisms. So it's a two-way thing. One, you get people who want to control others, and then you get people who want to be controlled because they feel safer when they know the boundaries. But I think that we are getting to a stage now where we are stepping outside of those realms where those boundaries really have any value. We're going beyond that. And I don't know whether it is something to do with the switchover that happened in 2012. It seems very likely that we're getting a lot more energies. And remember, those energies are going to be interacting with our Meissner fields. And those Meissner fields, those energies are basically going to be interacting with our Meissner fields, and Meissner fields are going to be interpreting that and sending that information to our DNA, which is going to be moderating our cell structures. So the environment, in other words, that we're living in has changed. It has become a lot more energetic. And we see this, we see this all the way through the world at the moment. We're seeing the world splitting up into almost two sections down the middle. You're seeing a whole group of people who are saying, well, actually, I think I'd just like to get on and live with everyone else and have a good time, and this is going to be a nice place. And you get the other group of people who are just angry. They don't know what they're angry about, but they're just angry about everything. And it's almost that split that we're seeing, but we're also seeing well, let's go back to DNA again. We have two strands of DNA. One strand of DNA is mammalian, and the other strand of DNA is reptilian. The first, the reptilian brain is the old brain. It's the brainstem, and the bottom of the brain has thalamus, the stuff that is responsible for us reacting. And then we have the mammalian brain, which is on top of that, which is the cortex, which allows us to think, rationalize, and do sensible things. And these two things are always fighting with each other. And so you get a choice. When this energy arrives, you get a choice of saying, well, how am I going to use this energy, extra energy? How am I going to interpret it? Am I going to become calmer, or am I going to become more aggressive? And we're seeing literally a split in the world's population, where people are really, really confused about what they are, what they want, where they want to go. And some people are looking for safety, and they're looking for safety in structures which will basically tie them down. It's okay, I don't mind being told what to do because at least I know where I am. And other people are saying, well, actually, we don't want to do that at all. We want to expand and do all sorts of different things. So we're seeing this battle being fought out as we live day to day on this planet. And one of the things that you really need in order to be able to transact that well with yourself, because it's an argument you're having with yourself, is a strong Meissner field, because that will allow you to be able to interpret the signals that you're getting, not just from the outside environment, but from other people. You can walk into a room and I could cut the atmosphere with a knife, or it felt really fantastic. And that's the difference really between walking into a situation where you are feeling a lot of aggression towards you, or whether you're walking into a nurturing environment where you feel everyone wants to, interact with you on a positive way. These things are very important. And then going back to the ancient Egyptians, they used to use Ormus specifically for being able to amplify the power of the light body. Now, we are really of the understanding, if we look at the skeletons of the elongated skulls and things like that, these people had extra brain mass. Whatever they used that for, it could very well have been something that interacted with Ormus to allow them to be able to, if you like, slip sideways between realms. And you slip sideways between realms very easily with one of these things, because essentially you just drop it through and you can come back again. And this is one of the things that they discovered about Ormus in about 1975, when it was basically rediscovered by David Hudson. And essentially what it was if you place Ormus under stress, and this is in powder form, if you place it under stress by hitting it with certain frequencies of light, a lot of it being the infrared end of the spectrum, if powerful enough, 43% of it will disappear. It will just disappear. And when you cool it down again, it'll come back again. So nobody knows where it's going, but it's scooting out of this dimension, this frequency. And so when you are scooting out of this frequency, if you can do that using your brain and your body, which is basically powered by your perception, which is enhanced by your brain and the use of Ormus, then it gives you access to different realms. Now, the way I've been using access, I've written a couple of books. One of them was called Little Book of Orm, which is the first one that I wrote, which was my early days of experimenting with Ormus. I think it was published about 2011 or something. I wrote another one in 2014 called Little Book of Chi. Both of those books, I can hardly remember what I wrote in them. I read through them and I think, oh God, yeah, I did write that. Yeah. But the way that I wrote them was I would be taking Ormus Gold last thing at night. I would go into dream state, and I would then, when I was waking up, I would collect all the thoughts from that dream state and I would write them down. So it would make sense, which is why probably I've forgotten most of what I've written down there. And I'll look back at it and think, well, God, did I write that? It seems to make sense. But that's the sort of thing you can do. You can use it in that particular way. And what I think it does is that when I'm in a dream state, I can be in communication with a higher version of myself that knows the answers. And the problem is getting those answers down to this body in a way that I can use it or translate it here. And that I do that via dream states. It's not something which is that uncommon, to be perfectly honest. I think David Wilcox basically has written all of the books that he's written and all the research that he's done. It has been on the basis of dream state analysis and basically reinterpreting what he's had in dreams. And as you can see, if you look at what David Wilcox has been saying, he's pretty much on the ball. There's not a lot that, especially in the way of geometric sciences and what have you, that he's missed out on. So he's definitely getting information from somewhere, whether it being from another being. I think it's more likely that he's getting it from himself, but his higher state self. I mean, the whole idea really is that this is a kind of virtual reality world, and we have another version of us which is at a much higher level, and they're basically operating the controls. We're here to experience it. So there's all sorts of things that can be brought in there, but you need a communications media, and the Ormus appears to be a communications media. Whether we as human beings are able to reach the same stage of perception that these other beings reached, we don't know. But we also know that our perceptions of everything around us are being basically highly suppressed into a very, very narrow bandwidth. Because if you look at the famous double slit experiment, where they're shooting photons through one at a time and working out whether they are actually going to producing whether it's a particle or it's a field. It's a particle or a field depending on what you want it to be. So the consciousness is becoming involved in the mechanism on the quantum level and is reshaping the perception of the person and the actually reshaping the event. So we are living in a very strange environment where we are beginning to be aware that our mental state and our perceptive state are not only being suppressed, but are virtually unlimited if they were given free rein. So again, we are looking at these two different directions where people are going, where people are frightened and looking for safety, and other people are just saying, no, we just want to take off, we've had enough of this. So it's an odd dichotomy, but at the same time, it's something which is, to say the least, more than interesting. It's fascinating. We're living in some absolutely fantastic times at the moment. No matter whether you think it's good or bad or whatever it is, we are living in extraordinary times. I think we should all be very, very glad to be here.
Yeah, certainly an adventure, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you want the ultimate adventure, this is definitely it. Yeah.
It's certainly a place for learning and growth. So it's a very holistic approach that you've outlined there. So it's talking about our mental state, our perception, our energetic state, and what we put into our bodies. So it's kind of mind and physical aspect, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I mean, everything is holistic. Whether you like it or not, everything is holistic. One of the things that I came out with really in the second book is that there is no real structure to anything, but there is a pattern to everything. And whether something will work or not work is how well it interacts with the pattern. So that if you are, I used to talk about them in terms of flat and spherical thinking. Flat thinking would be, well, we start off at point A and then we go to point B, point C, and you go all the way along till you reach wherever you need to go. That would be someone like Bill Gates, who would be logically interpreting and writing a computer language or an algorithm, and algorithms are written very much on a flat basis. And then you look at someone like Steve Jobs, who would be a spherical thinker. And the spherical thinker would say, well, there's no point in inventing anything. What is there out there already, and how can we put it together in a unique way? In a unique way that will work. So, I mean, the world needs both thinkers. Really high entrepreneurs would tend to be spherical thinkers. Fantastic business organizers would be flat thinkers, because they will get the organizational structures running. They'll see where all the bits and pieces and the sequence, everything needs to run in. Whereas the spherical thinker will just be off on a new thought somewhere else, inventing something. So the world needs both, but the majority of people in this world are flat thinkers. And that's because we have been educated to be flat thinkers. We've been told that right away from school, the very first time you go to school, for the very first time, kindergarten, your first day at school, you will realize there is a hierarchy. And you must follow that hierarchy, and that hierarchy is the right way to do it. I used to get blitzed when I was doing sort of business analyses and putting forward new business plans for people, or business structures, because every single time I did that, I would never write a business structure which was hierarchical. I would always produce it as a Venn diagram, how people interact with other people. And although everyone says, oh, yes, that is the most sensible way to do it, it's the most efficient way of doing it, we can actually utilize our staff better, and with better relations between the staff, and perhaps we don't need to take on so many staff so we make more money from this. But at the end of the day, it's not following the hierarchy structure. So, we must have a boss. And you go, well, fair enough. If that's what you want to do, I can give you a hierarchy, but it's not going to work as well. So there are two ways, but I'm a spherical thinker, so I can't think in terms of structures in that particular way, which probably makes me a little bit insane, but that's life.
Yes, like you say, we need both, don't we?
Yeah.
We need both. Both are valuable. You need to be able to structure things properly. I did a course in what was called effective intelligence. I don't know if you know about effective intelligence, but it's a form of psychometric testing. And the psychometric test is very, very subtly worded. So you answer a group, I can't remember, it must be about 100 questions or something like that. And the psychometric testing will give a result in terms of colour. So you have blue, green and red. And so you can colour your own in. You get your scores at the end of it, and you colour it in and as a percentage bar. So you might have, 10% red. Well, I'll give you my results. I was 10% red, 40% green, and the balance 50% blue. Blue relates to intelligence. Green is creativity. And red, organizational abilities.
Right.
But it doesn't say that you're bad at any of them. It's just that you have a preference for it. So if you want to put a group of people together, and I believe Boeing do this, aircraft company do this, they use effective intelligence for putting together teams of people to design and build aircraft. So you need to have people who are going to be thinking up in the clouds and doing crazy things with their thoughts, because then you need to push the boundaries a bit further, maybe material science, maybe aerodynamic science. You need to have people with the intelligence levels to be able to basically take these wild and stupid ideas and say, well, actually, we need to have a bit more sense with this. So we're going to put this into action. We're going to try it this way. And then you need someone to record and to monitor everything. So you need that level of people. And so they will organize their teams to have the mix that's necessary to optimize the whole production facility, or the whole creation or research facility, by having the right number of people in there. But the difference is that everyone will enjoy doing their job. And if you enjoy doing your job, you're going to do 100% more than you would do if you had to take away 30% because you didn't like that particular section of it. Or in my case, it'd be 90% because of the 10% of the admin side, which I hate doing. So it's a weird thing. But when you're talking in terms of Ormus, you then have to relate back to this kind of model where it is a holistic model. It's impossible to tie it down or almost down to being one particular substance. And many people who've been experimenting with it for many years will basically tell you the one thing about Ormus is it just goes where it's needed. And people's experience taking it are generally very, very different. Some people have no reaction to it at all, or no conscious reaction to it. Some people are hypersensitive and get dizzy and fall over when they take it the first time. It's a weird sort of substance, but it's something that is definitely missing. And one of the things that most of us in the Ormus community try to do most is to encourage people to make their own, because literally if you have the right knowledge you can just make this stuff at home on your own. If you were to give it to your kids, can you imagine what they could do with their brains?
Yeah, actually we've just got a few more minutes now left, Herman, so perhaps we can wrap up with a link or a reference to where people can find out more on how to make it themselves.
There are Ormus groups in Facebook. One of the best of them, one of them is called Ormus, Ormus, or you can go to the Little Book of Chi, which is one of my pages, or you can go to the AOAOP page. These are all on Facebook, and they will all send you off to different websites as well. And that is the Association of Accredited Ormus Producers, so that you know if you want to buy some Ormus to try it out for yourself, to see whether it's going to work for you, you can go to a genuine producer who's going to tell you the real stuff, because there was an enormous amount of fake stuff out there.
Yeah, sure.
There's very little of it now. Most of the people who are producing it are actually producing the real stuff, depending on how good it is. Or you can go to my website, which is Chilectric, Chilectric, Chilectric.com. There you can also read the Little Book of Chi and the Little Book of Orm, which are both free downloads.
Brilliant.
Awesome.
Okay, yeah, thank you. It's been fascinating.
It has. I don't think we've ever sat so quietly.
I'm just the motor man.
No, it's been fascinating.
But it's a fascinating subject. You could talk about it for ages, and often it's not its best if you're doing it on a live basis with an audience, because then you can relate your answers and reactions to what people are really concerned with. So a question and answer session with an audience is often the best way to do it.
Yeah.
So invite me next year to the multimedia, your multidimensional show.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, we'll definitely have you back and have a live audience at some point, so we can put questions to the audience and.
Yeah, it's very useful, and it's one of those things, because everyone would appear to need it for a different reason, and you can then help people to steer them in the right direction, and also what they should be taking, whether it's going to be a wide spectrum Ormus or a specific one, depending on what their requirements are.
So
basically, it's all this.
Yeah.
Everything is this.
Yeah.
Everything's the Taurus.
Toroidal. Yeah.
Toroidal. Yeah.
Everything is toroidal. Yeah.
So if people are watching this and are kind of intrigued and want to get started, and they go to your website, Herman, can they contact you through there for advice? They can
contact me through there from advice. If people are watching in the United States, there are some very, very good Ormus producers. In fact, the world's best alchemist lives in Florida.
Okay.
His name is Don Nance. And if I were to be studying alchemy for about 40 lifetimes, maybe I'd get to about a quarter of what he knows already.
Okay.
Wow.
And there are a lot of very, very good producers in the United States. They have quite a very large community there. The Ormus group itself, I think, has about 4,000 or 5,000 members of it on it. So it's growing. It's growing rapidly.
Yeah.
And it's something which I think people will actually clue in with, as long as they eventually get onto the stage of making their own. If you buy some, you want to make sure you get the good stuff, because otherwise if you get fake stuff, you'll think, well, it doesn't do anything. It's a waste of time. If you do get a good producer, and there's a list of producers or recommended producers on the AOP website, and they will tell you, that you will get the real stuff from these people. Try it out. If it fits with you, well, then consider making it yourself, because once you've actually got the gear together, and it's quite simple stuff, it's only knowledge you need, and you can accumulate that over a number of years. But making your own will be a very, very valuable asset, because it will replace a lot of what is missing from your food. So from the point of view of growing children, or just adults wishing to be healthy, or people wishing to retrain their endocrine systems because they're on a slimming diet or something like that, you need to retrain your systems. Otherwise, it doesn't matter, once you stop dieting, you're going to start putting the weight back on again, because the systems are already laid down there, programmed to store fat as opposed to burn it. So there's a lot of different systems that are there, but they would all be enhanced by being able to try and get your Meissner field and your basic endocrine system back in order.
Wow. Okay, thank you, Herman. We'll put the reference at the end to those links, and just thank you very much for giving your time to share some valuable information. It feels like we scratched the surface, but it's been fascinating.
Yeah, it has been fascinating.
And I'm sorry I didn't give you more time to say some things yourself. But
that's okay.
also started. I'm sorry, you can't stop.
There'll be a follow-up, I'm sure.
Yeah, it sounds like this needs to have a part 2.
Okay.
Brilliant.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.